Hello, everyone. Welcome to Impact Makers, your product experience podcast. You might be noticing something that is different today. My name is Coco Wu, and you might have seen me speaking about the rise of click-free shopping during our special visual episode when AI takes the basket. My day job is a strategist at Huxley, part of the MMR group.
And I'm Harshita Mullick. Hi, everyone. I'm a regular on the Impact Makers podcast from the beginning, but the difference now is I've moved to Singapore. For this episode, your regular hosts, Andrew and Caitlin, have very generously stepped back, but they will be joining us very shortly.
And that allows us to take the stage for a long overdue Asia Takeover.
There's been a growing sense across food, drink, beauty, and retail that the most interesting ideas aren't actually coming from where they used to.
That's increasingly Asia that is shaping the global innovation scene.
Coco, it's brilliant to be doing this episode together. And as you know, I've only recently made Singapore my home, having spent several years in London.
Wow, this is great. You must be really excited with what is going on here. And there's so much contracts with the West. So what has fascinated you the most?
Oh, well, lots of things. But first off, Asia really does feel like you're in the future. The relationship between consumer and digital, it's way more fluid than the West. Everything here just seems to be set up with a digital first approach. The other thing that's hit me is the speed at which categories develop here. The products seem to come so fast, boom, and fizzle into the mainstream in the matter of no time. It really feels like manufacturers put more emphasis on upgrading the offer or chasing trends. So there's so much more to discover. The other thing is the landscape of categories here just feels different. Take, for example, the obvious visibility of solo living. What I've noticed is brands here really consider the category dynamics as a design principle, not really a compromise.
Exactly. I think increasingly you are seeing solo dining booths, which is already a norm in Japan or in China in a lot of restaurants. And there's a lot of customization and AI companion that is happening. So the expectation here is really about how did this work for me on my own? I think it might sound quite counterintuitive because we usually talk about Asia is more of a collective society, like people prioritize the collective living. But what is also true here is people are increasingly recognize the agency of individuality. So we need to recognize that Asia is changing and culture is evolving.
Interestingly, markets in Asia definitely don't act as followers, but instead they rewrite the rules of how they want to play. Take, for example, the one thing that is on all Western headlines right now, GLP-1s. Something that we talk a lot about on this podcast and we follow very closely. As it stands, unlike the US, where they have already exploded, markets like China are on a totally different trajectory. And that's not because there's no need for it here. In fact, forecasts show 2/3 of Chinese adults could be overweight by 2030. And with a population size like that, that's a huge problem. But signals now show that China is becoming one of the most important GLP-1 battlegrounds globally, with local pharma companies, as well as Pfizer and Eli Lilly, all investing heavily. But in true China spirit, they will be doing things their way. There are now over 100 GLP-1 drugs in development in China alone, which is around 40% of the global pipeline. And with barriers that previously slowed adoption, such as costs starting to fall with local generics and competition bringing the prices down, the message is clear. China could become the largest GLP-1 market in the world by the end of the decade.
And I'm sure that there will be a knock-on effect of this on the consumer goods category. What do you think, Harshi?
Definitely. This is not just a pharma story. It's actually a possible reshaping of the entire food, drink, and retail sector, as we're seeing in the US. But actually, this is going to be at a whole new scale.
Speaking of scale, I remember you being quite blown away by the scale at which things are operating here in Asia, especially in China, right?
Oh, 100%. My perception of scale has completely changed. In markets like China, something small scale is likely massive when you compare it to the West. I mean, China already has over 400 million middle class consumers, and that's bigger than the entire population of the US and the UK combined. Welcome back, Andy and Caitlin.
Thank you. Nice to be here. And we do promise not to ruin your episode, but we wanted to ask some of the questions that many of our listeners would probably want to ask.
Absolutely, we do. I've got a backdrop for you, which is that, there is a definite uptick in active corporate interest here in the West because they see that, the future growth potential and profits are highly dependent upon them winning consumers in Asia. And I think one proof point for this comes from Deloitte's 2026 Global Outlook survey. And that said that 39% of US-based CPG execs specify Southeast Asia as offering the greatest growth potential anywhere on the planet.
Well, I guess many of the ways in which growth has been propped up in the West are no longer viable, whether that's because of price increases, reformulations, and the recently ever-present shrinkflation. There is no longer really any road here. So back to your combo, Harshi and Coco, let's get some retail therapy into the mix because by my reckoning, retail in Asia is becoming something completely different. Less transactional, more restorative, spaces that are really designed for calm discovery and even emotional reset.
Yes, exactly. And I think what is also fascinating that is happening here is one of the most advanced e-commerce ecosystems in the world. So online is still dominating the growth, but it doesn't mean that physical retail is dying. So it's about evolving into something much more experiential, almost like lifestyle labs. So places where brands create meanings, not just transactions.
Well, WGSN talks about stores becoming healing spaces, places that offer psychological safety and a sense of community, which is incredible when you think about it. Retail is actual therapy.
That is super interesting. But at the same time, there's also a huge shift that is happening, which is about convenience. Everyone knows about 7-Eleven stores in Asia, which is amazing. I love it. But the entire retail landscape is now shifting again.
Ah, yes, there are some super interesting expressions of this, even here in Singapore. One of my favorites is New Baru, which is a school complex that has been completely reimagined into a space for more homegrown creative businesses to grow and flourish. Every time I go there, I actually end up discovering something new and exciting.
Just adding on to that, New Baru will actually only sell Singapore-made brands. So this is really about creating that idea about retail space being more about the community, a sense of belonging, and the celebration of the craftsmanship.
Exactly. There's really an important idea here that consumers across the region, they aren't just buying products anymore. They're starting to buy cultural resonance. We've seen people returning to heritage, local identity, Eastern aesthetics, but these are all being reimagined in very modern ways. So the stores, they start to feel like galleries or even really rich cultural spaces.
Wow, that sounds great. And it's quite extreme on that sort of human side of retail, as you say. But on the flip side, what's happening with the whole AI retail spectrum?
Well, of course, Andy, it is Asia, so you will be seeing some very different things here. We're really seeing the rise of some super interesting AI-enabled retail experiences here, tying into this whole agentic era of shopping from your previous episode. So, Coco, have you seen the store of tomorrow from Fair Price here in Singapore?
Yes, absolutely. FairPrice is the largest supermarket chain in Singapore, and they have just launched a hyper-personalized Gen AI-powered supermarket. They are aiming to make grocery shopping a Singaporeans' favorite pastime and make everything easier.
And they have hyper personalized shopping recommendations and promotions. which means that shoppers are actually able to walk around the store, scan QR codes, and get an extended range of products that are not necessarily in the store, but they can purchase and have delivered to their homes. So at the core, what they are doing is blending physical and online retail seamlessly. Could this actually be a clue of where retail is heading in the future?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And it seems like just as the West is really starting to try to step up its presence in the East is coming back toward the West with elements like the China maxing trend, which is really highlighting how Eastern culture and values are starting to creep into the Western mindset.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing this everywhere, aren't we, Caitlin? And what are we actually talking about, Coco, when we talk about China maxing?
China maxing at its simplest is actually just about the recognition about Chinese culture, or more broadly about Asian culture. It's about the living philosophy and the systems that is becoming more like a cultural reference point. So that is all about aesthetics, tech innovations, wellness routines, etc. And you might have witnessed on social media, there are a lot of viral hashtags around, you met me at the most Chinese era. So you see people waking up every day and start drinking hot water. And they start trying TCM remedies, gua sha, and wearing slippers indoors, practicing qigong and cooking congee, and basically adopting many ways of Chinese living practice that might be totally the opposite of the inherent Western living.
Why is all this happening now, though, Coco?
Well, yeah, there's so much to unpack here because I think on the surface it might looking very positive and fascinating, and it's all about celebrating this Chinese coded habit, way of living, products, and culture of reference.
Mm.
And it feels like it's just another trend happening on social media as well. But I think deep down, there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of emotional fatigue that has caused this because we need to recognize that Asia's soft power is growing, and the obsession with Chinese practice isn't necessarily just a reflection of Beijing's influence. Rather, what China Maxim really reveals is a loss of faith in the US identity, or more in general, Western identity as the default mode of progress.
Yeah, there is increasing voices here in the West that I've been hearing that capitalism isn't working. And so, that all does tie in, doesn't it, with this idea of being more receptive, perhaps, in the West to China's system, which is saying something.
I was going to say as well, just to build on what you were adding, Andy, that among, I think, older millennials, Coco, you're absolutely right. There's particularly even more skepticism toward the pharmaceutical industry, and it's causing a lot of people to start their China maxing journey through traditional Chinese medicine or TCM. So there are way more people that I have recognized even within my own friends group that are now seeking out methods like cupping and acupuncture much more regularly before going to see a conventional Western doctor. So there's a lot really starting from the inside out that is being influenced by trying to get back to more natural roots. And we see that across the industry, but I think TCM is a really strong starting point for a lot of people when they make that change.
Yeah, and I think what is also very interesting is not a top-down movement, right? It really coming from like a bottom-up, and people are kind of using this individual activities to challenge the infrastructure,
Yeah,
to challenge the system, which is fascinating.
it is. It has cracked me up, though, to see all the Instagram posts that are like, I drank a cup of hot water this morning, like China maxing. Like, okay, is everybody okay in here? So ultimately, this is a really complex trend. However, we definitely are seeing this as something that's getting super viral, and probably a lot of brands want to jump on it. So, do you have any advice to the brands that are interested in having a piece of China maxing?
So I guess for brands, the real opportunity is not to imitate Chinese symbols, but to actually understand the emotional and cultural needs driving this fascination.
Hmm.
So, for example, if people are drinking hot water in the morning, eating congee, or, practicing gua sha, it's not because these things are Chinese for the sake of being Chinese. It's because they signal something else. They signal gentleness, embodied care, low cost wellness, and everyday practices that really feel restorative in a high pressure world. And I guess, Coco, the question to you is, as a Chinese cultural specialist, what do you think is the most important thing that innovators need to keep in mind when they're entering the China or APAC markets?
Well, first of all, I think there are a few questions that brands should ask themselves. What are the rituals, values, or the systems people are looking for here? Is it about comfort? Is it about efficacy? Is it about a holistic way of living? I think that's where the strategic value really lands.
And I think the brands that will do this well are the ones that understand this as part of a larger rebalancing of global influence. And they're the ones that are able to respond with a degree of humility, some curiosity, and ultimately quite a lot of substance.
So we know that globally, CPG is under a lot of pressure, and I assume that in APAC, this is highly accelerated. So how do brands maintain the momentum or keep consumers coming back?
Well, Caitlin, one of the biggest misconceptions is that consumers in Asia are either trading up or trading down. But actually, they're doing both and constantly at the same time. So they might buy ultra low cost drinks at the 7-Eleven daily, but they're also then splurging on the premium skincare. And this could be quite frequent, weekly almost. Both of them feel intentional as well, which means that brands really need to design for like fluid value systems, not fixed price tiers.
And so I guess this kind of reflects what we said at the end of the last episode, which is that increasingly there's signs of this K-shaped economy where the middle ground is at most risk.
That's right. And I guess brands then, as a result of that K-shaped economy, really need to step it up. I'd be curious to know then, how are brands leveraging emotion in CPG categories and beyond?
Well, what I've noticed is that emotion isn't really a layer that manufacturers are bolting on in the end. Rather, it's much more baked into the product experience here. So whether that's comfort, control, identity, and in some markets, emotional consumption is becoming a primary growth driver. Take, for example, Caitlin, one of your favorite markets, Japan, where we see this trend around fandom frenzy and kawaii culture, which is actually selling things that are cute. So cuteness is at the crux of the sell. And we've all heard about brands like Pop Mart. The Labubu is basically capitalizing on this. And you see this in food and drink too, with other expressions like minification, food and drink items being made particularly smaller and smaller, just because smallness is cute. An example of this was actually a bakery that I saw in Singapore, and it was called the Mini One, where they were selling these tiny little adorable croissants. And I genuinely just wanted to buy one because it was cute. But the idea here is that the cuteness doesn't just draw you in and make it super Instagrammable, but it actually plays an important role in allowing consumers to buy into the product. So, for example, that mini croissant then enables a small permissible indulgence or caters for portionality that I wouldn't get if I had a whole croissant.
Well, there you are, Caitlin. We were saying that maybe shrinkflation is coming to an end, but maybe this whole cute thing gives it some few more years yet.
I wouldn't be surprised, particularly with Pop Mart's most recent move to open a giant flagship store in New York City that sits right next to the Metropolitan Museum of Modern Art. So talk about permissible indulgence. Think about a nice day at the museum, and then you get to step into the cute stuff store just beside. It's going to be a really interesting experience, and they're really trying to bring it to that elevated level of an emotional store experience that goes beyond just the cuteness of their products.
And, this comes through in things like blind boxes as well, where you don't actually know what you're going to get, but it's so exciting just to open that little box, even though it's a tiny little plastic toy. It really is getting people buying into a bigger idea of just that small little pleasure.
It's that short attention span culture that we've devolved into as a result of all of these social media algorithms, right? All we need to be captivated for is about 30 seconds of opening a package that we don't know what's inside or seeing the cute little face of a scary little monster keychain. And there you have it. That dopamine hit is there just as if you scrolled past a video of a cute puppy or a particularly delicious looking meal. So
She's got it.
Exactly. It's a bit scarier now you say it like that, Chickless.
I know, I'm like, this is the internet crossing into reality, that shortest attention span economy. All you need is 15 seconds and $25 to $50.
So coming up, we'll take a look at what lies ahead for Asia with J.K. Wang, who is a member of the Futurist movement based in Shanghai. But first, if you're a regular listener to our podcast, you have heard our regular check-ins with the infamous Gen Z.
I mean, Hashi, where do we even start?
Well, maybe we could start with wellness, because this feels like one of the biggest areas that Gen Z is really pushing back on.
I think you're right. It's clear to everyone that wellness has been part of the mainstream culture for some time, both here in Asia and globally. But let's face it, achieving wellness has put a lot of pressure on individuals. Many people feel like they're being judged. All of those social media posts and selling optimized routines and health hacks and perfect bodies feels tiring.
And that is exhausting, even just hearing you list it. So I guess the question is, Coco, how has this felt for you as a millennial?
Well, I can totally relate, I can tell you. I also grew up being told how to live by my parents, school, exam system, and all those expectations, and increasingly there's societal standards. And now, of course, it's the algorithm piling on the pressure.
Yeah, and it seems like that actually Gen Z has probably started a bit of a rebellion, right? What they're calling this anti-wellness movement. But Coco, this rebellion isn't really against health itself, right?
Absolutely not. It's a backlash against the perfection. Gen Z doesn't reject wellness, they reject being judged by it.
And I guess this is where food and drink takes on such an interesting role, because it can maybe become a safe space for these Gen Z to rebel. And it's really giving them the permission to maybe dial up some of that sensory play and I guess embrace this idea of an unapologetic indulgence so that they're not answerable to anyone for their consumption choices.
Yes, exactly. So Gen Z here in Asia are enjoying ice creams with French fries and adding grated cheese on their milk tea. They are truly maximize their indulgence.
And I guess this isn't about Gen Z being irresponsible, right? It's simply emotional relief. And that's because food and drink can offer something wellness culture often doesn't. And that is this permission to enjoy without explanation. Gen Z is not, of course, the only disruptor across Asia today.
No, of course not. So just as China maxing has spread west, consumers and the markets have continued to be impacted by a range of distant cultural waves. Recently, we've had a J-wave, which brought the essence of Japanese design, food culture, precision, and minimalist design. And then the K-wave, K-pop, K-beauty, K-drama, and those waves are also shaping the Western taste, of course. And now it's the turn of C-wave. How would you explain C-wave, Hashi?
Well, funny, the Chinese person's asking me, but I guess it's an interesting one because it isn't just about aesthetics or entertainment. It seems to be much more about platforms, formats, and maybe operating models. So what you're starting to see is things like C-drama dominating short form video formats globally. You see food trends moving from Chengdu, Guangzhou, not really Paris or New York. And you see internet native characters like, Labubu spreading across the entire globe.
Yeah, nice. So I think Labubu went viral globally not only because of the story or the format or the aesthetic itself. It's actually about the emotional rewarding for the Gen Z. So C-Wave isn't about exploring the culture itself. It's about exploring the whole way of living and a new way of engaging. So it's about the whole infrastructure, the platforms, the data, the ecosystem that allows Chinese brand to scale at completely different speed.
I guess this whole Labubu phenomena really proves that products and brands can now be grown just by the internet. They don't need to be marketed traditionally. And you can see shades of this when you compare how brands evolve in China versus the West, because it seems like the difference isn't just style.
It's not. And one of my favorite example is Dreamy versus Dyson. Now, Dyson is a classic Western success story. It's about decades of engineering innovation, strong IP, and premium positioning. And it builds category defining products. And it does so on relatively long innovation cycles. But here in China, Dreamy took a completely different route. The brand emerged inside the Xiaomi ecosystem, connected system of devices, service, and partners where products are consistently feeding data into each other. So from day one, Dreamy wasn't just about building that product. It's about building inside a live and responsive ecosystem.
And, as a convert myself from Dyson to Dreamy, I can see that this really changes everything, especially the speed at which they're operating, because it seems like Dreamy follows a very typical new generation Chinese playbook, which, starts with first identifying a premium brand, then not even match or closely match, sometimes even totally outperform it, and then launch it at a dramatically lower price. But the real advantage here, it isn't just cost, it's actually iteration. And you can see that these brands are constantly improving their products. Their innovation cycles are much, much faster. They get feedback from consumers much faster. And then they can provide these upgrades at a pace that is totally unmatched. So what starts as good enough becomes as good, and then in some cases, better. And really outshines some of the products that we would have held as the gold standard. So Luckin Coffee's dramatic rise over Starbucks in China and Southeast Asia is truly remarkable. And Coco, how do you think they did it?
So, as you know, Starbucks built its brand around the third space, a space to sit, to linger, and to socialize. But Luckin Coffee spotted something different. People don't necessarily want to stay. They want coffee faster and often at their desk. So Luckin Coffee didn't outbrand Starbucks. It designed for a different behavior. Digital first, built for the office, not for the cafe. And by solving that real need, not some imagined lifestyle, it fundamentally changed the category.
Yeah, and I mean, it's going to be so interesting to see if Luckin Coffee can succeed in America, because they have around 10 stores in New York City already. And we know that Luckin has been heavily discounting to drive trial. And that's been noticed, obviously, as cost of living keeps rising. By Luckin keeping their prices quite low, it's really resonating with today's consumers. But I think the key point here is that Luckin's model has traveled. And this is a true testament to the Chinese brands challenging the Western brands. And they're not only doing this by the products they make, but the entire system and how they operate.
Yes, exactly. I think that's what Saywave is really about. It's not just about doing the Western brands cheaper. It's about answering people's true needs and reframing the logic behind a rewarding experience.
Exactly. It feels less about storytelling now and much more about system design. All right. So, across this episode, we may have given the impression that Asia is already in the future. But what if we took you even further out? So, to make this a reality, we're delighted to welcome the futurist expert, J.K. Wang, onto Impact Makers. Wang is an executive member of the Futurist Circle based in Shanghai. So, welcome to the Asia Takeover, JK.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Honestly, listening to you guys talking about how Asia brands are designing for reality instead of dreams, it matches exactly what I've been looking into lately.
That's super interesting. What do you mean by that?
Well, a futurist's job is basically to translate. We translate between emerging technology and everyday life. So we are always asking, when does something stop feeling technical and start feeling normal?
So it's not really about predicting gadgets, it's more about predicting behaviors.
Exactly. And in business, that matters because companies don't just need to know what's changing, they need to know what to do about it, what to build, how to position, where to move. That's really the commercial side of futurism, making changes usable.
Ah, okay, fair. And I guess like AI is probably the biggest example of that right now, isn't it?
Yeah, because this is no longer just a story about new technology. It's a story about new expectations. AI is starting to become part of the environment, quiet, embedded, always there. And in Asia, you can already see what's happening when that shift enters everyday life.
So, JK, then what is the most unexpected trend that you're tracking right now?
Well, that will be the speed at which humans and AI are sharing the work. AI tech itself started in the West. We see developers building tools where you can just type a sentence and AI writes 80% of the codes. The West is really starting this co-pilot trend. What's crazy about China is the speed. They took the exact logic, human does 20% of the talking and AI does 80% of the work, and pulled it out of the tech bubble. Now they are putting it right into the hands of a 60-year-old buying groceries.
Exactly, that is so true. And I think we also talked about this briefly in our last visual episode when AI take the basket. In China, what is really fascinating is that how tech giants breaking the hierarchy and take the most advanced tech to the general public.
This really reminds me of Doubao, the app that's taking over China at the moment, right?
Yeah, Doubao literally translates to Bing Bong, like a little steam bun. It's one of the most popular AI apps in China right now. And that name is so clever. Doubao is incredibly successful because it makes tech feel completely harmless. They didn't build a scary, super smart robot, they built a body. It's on your phone. You can send it a messy voice message. You can just complain to it. It feels close to everyday people. It makes people feel safe enough to just ask it to do things.
That's such a great contrast because if you actually think about it, a lot of people have started using AI via learning the prompt skills to make it work for you.
Right. But in reality, regular consumers don't want to learn how to talk to machines. They want the machine to understand them. And when you put this Doubao mindset into real life problems, it gets really interesting. Look at healthcare. Look at what Alipay is doing with their AI house assistant, Afu.
Afu. Oh, well, please tell us more. I haven't not heard that much about it yet.
Well, think about how stressful seeing a doctor is. If your kid wakes up with a weird rash, your first reaction is to Google it, right? But searching just gives you 10 articles that makes you think it is the worst case scenario. You do 80% of the work and you take 100% of the panic. With Afu, you either snap a photo of the rash or you just speak into the phone. My kid has fever and a rash. What do I do? And the AI doesn't just give you a health article, it acts as a front desk nurse. It says, okay, based on this, don't panic, but you should see a doctor. Here is the nearest hospital with an open slot. Shall I book it for you? And what makes this actually work in China is the ecosystem. Afu is built right inside Alipay. Chinese consumers have spent the last 10 years trusting these apps with their money, their chats, their food delivery. The trust is already there because the app actually finish the job for you. In the end, the tech is not just giving advice, it's finishing the task. It takes messy, stressful situation and organizes it for you.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. I really want to use the Ashu app as well. But how might this then impact consumers' reality more precisely, to like everyday products and groceries? So, say if consumers are getting used to an AI booking their doctor, how does this change the way they maybe buy skincare or a new brand or face wash?
I think it completely changes the game of shopping. Think about how we shop today. You have a problem. I'm stressed out, my sleep is bad, and my skin is breaking out. What do? You go on Xiaohongshu, you go on some other platform to watch like 5 reviews or more. You compare it ingredients, you check the prices. But if my AI is already managing my life, I'm going to stop doing the research. I'll just tell my AI, my skin is a mess and I'm super stressed and I have $50, fix it for me. And the AI just builds the shopping cart. It's click free shopping when AI blocks out all the marketing noise and just finds the exact products for your problem. So for brands, the scary truth is you're no longer just marketing to humans, you're marketing to their AI assistants.
Well, that's equal parts terrifying and exciting for CPG brands. And so, I guess what I want to ask is, as a final thought, if you could give one piece of advice to global leaders that are maybe listening right now who are trying to prepare for this future, what would you tell them?
Well, I think stop expecting consumer to do the hard work. We are entering a time where convenience means zero mental effort, and that will happen fast and first in Asia. The winning brands won't just be the ones with the best products. They will be the ones that are easiest for an AI to understand and recommend.
Zero mental effort. I love that.
How do we find you in this world, JK?
Well, you can reach out to me from my LinkedIn, just searching for my name, Jiakun Wang. So Jiakun is Jiakun, Wang is Wang.
Thank you so much for joining us. This has been incredibly eye opening, JK.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for having us, Coco and Harshi. We've loved listening in. Now, tell us, in your view, why aren't more global brands winning in Asia?
Well, from what I'm learning, I think in many cases it's because they're trying to scale way too quickly. And they're scaling products that, they just don't fit here in the market.
Yes, I agree. I think the biggest risk right now isn't about moving too slowly. It's about scaling something that doesn't really belong here.
I mean, you've talked a lot, haven't you, in this episode about the importance of cultural fit. And I know that culture is kind of central to how you and Huxley operate. And I guess this is a constant struggle, isn't it? Because many Western brands that have already succeeded in China are actually finding themselves in a bit of trouble.
So, one illustration of this is seen in Nike, which is seeing sales decline by double digits across China, with cultural resonance cited as a key factor. What's going on here, Coco?
Well, we've mentioned the rise of Guochao quite a lot, and it is this word capture that surge in national cultural confidence here in China. Basically, a lot of the young people, they prefer Chinese brands that heighten their cultural identity. So brands like Anta and Li-Ning feels closer to their identity, while the brands like Nike feels imported and more distant. And it's very interesting that Adidas recently redesigned Tang Dynasty costume into their sportswear and it becoming a phenomenal cultural trend. A lot of foreigners even flooded into China to buy this design. And it also picked a lot of interest from the locals as well. So it also really shows the importance of international brands respecting the local culture and identity for the local audiences.
I've actually seen that jacket. And funny enough, I also want one. So, they really have managed to design products that span beyond just the local audience and really bring people in from abroad and beyond to buy in as well. But funny enough, Nike is still priced at a premium here in Asia.
Yes, and I think brands like Nike, they will struggle if they charge a premium without a clear reason why. I think this is the case highlighting the difference between Nike's classic business model, which is based upon global brand power, athlete endorsement, and just do it slogan. The emerging model that is fast becoming a standard here. And the new model is all about local culture embedding, platform native behavior, and community and rapid iterations.
So if I was a Western-based CPG brand that is trying to make my way in China or protect my business in China, what's the strategy right now?
Well, I think, one thing that is very obvious here is about respecting the local culture, the local heritage, right? About understanding this local culture in an infrastructural way and embedding the daily rituals into the modern living, rather than just taking the aesthetic and then put it in the design and say, you respect the culture. You need to understand it with a sense of recognition and a sense of like substance in the depth of the culture.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Coco. And thank you, Harshi, for sharing some of your insights with our listeners. Presumably, you're open to conversations from brands looking to be more culturally relevant across Asia.
Yeah, thank you for having us. If listeners want to get in touch, please go to huxleyglobal.com and click Talk to Us. You will find us there.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for letting us hang out with you. So much to think about. We hope that everyone's enjoyed this episode. We've certainly enjoyed making it. And we will love your company for future episodes too.
Yes. Have you ever hovered at the foot of the ambient aisle, the one with all of those jars, packets, and cans, and thought, nothing to see here? Well, that's a shame, because you could be missing out on some great products.
Yeah, so we'll be calling out some of these ambient all-stars that really do deserve our attention. So thank you again, Coco, Harshi. We promise to check in with you both again as we continue to track developments across Asia on the podcast.
We've loved doing it. Thank you so much for having us. This is Coco from Huxley.
And this is Harshi. See ya. Bye.
Bye-bye.